Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy. As many of you know, I am the chair of the honors program, and I'm so pleased to welcome everyone tonight for the first of our yearly Art and Politics lecture series, a series that touches on the intersections and the divergences between art and politics today. It is a series that asks questions in light of the crisis of contemporary society, in light of too late capitalism, as some call it, in light of the climate crisis, in light of massive inequality. What can art, what can politics do? Where do they diverge? Where do they converge in light of our tasks today? We have an exciting year coming up. I won't go too much into it, but we have a professor from Peru to talk about the indigenous protests. We have Frances Fox Piven coming to talk. We have I don't even remember what else. Karen Moscovich, her new book of art criticism, yada yada, more to come. So for tonight, though, I am thrilled to, without further ado, introduce my friend and distinguished poet, Kay Gabriel. Kay is the author, the editor of a volume of poetry, as well as the author of the two books you see on that table, Kissing Other People, and most recently, A Queen in Bucks County. Kay is a poet and an essayist and an activist and a really lovely, charismatic person. So I'm so thrilled to share her with you tonight a little bit, and let's give her a really warm round of applause.
I'm so touched. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Katie. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for coming and sharing the start of your semester, I guess the late start of your semester with me. I'm not teaching this term. I used to teach at NYU. I'm not teaching anymore, and I think I've missed the sort of the thrill of this kind of situation. Let me tell you what I'm going to do and what this evening is going to be like. So I'm going to read from this book. I'll tell you about it as well before I start reading from it, so you have a little bit of context for what I'm doing. And then I think we're going to talk the questions that Jeremy posed about the overlaps and divergences between art and politics, or between, you could say, cultural and political radicalism, are really intimately compelling to me, and I'm excited to think about that together. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about this book. A Queen in Bucks County is it's kind of a novel, but I didn't mean to write a novel. It just happened to be that I was writing a book, and then all of a sudden there was a character, and things happened to him. So I guess that's a theory of the novel. What else can I say by way of introduction? It's an epistolary book, which is a fancy way for saying that most of it happens in letters. The letters are written by a character. His name is Turner. His life overlaps almost but not quite entirely with mine, which is a really fun technique to not talk about yourself. There's this early trans studies, and by early I mean she was around in the 90s, early trans studies writer, scholar named Vivienne Namaste, who is still around. She teaches at Concordia, and she has this bit in 2000 where she says the only mode in which transsexual, it's a little prissy, but she says that she's miffed, can you tell? She's the only mode in which transsexuals are permitted to speak is autobiography. And that's 2000, it's 23 years ago. You guys, almost all of you were not alive yet. If I've misjudged that, let me know. But nonetheless, there is a kernel of truth in the kind of imperative to autobiography that was something on my mind, and something that I clearly don't accept, also neither quite reject. There's, you could say it's dialectical. I think that's everything I need to tell you. Where is Bucks County? Bucks County is in Pennsylvania. I've never lived there. Transsexuals can write about things other than ourselves. But when I was living in Jersey and writing this book, I wasn't that far from the western part of PA, Philly, the part just outside of it where Bucks County is. And I was like having all these kind of dim hookups with men in the area, in Philly or around Philly or in Central Jersey. And then I was reading this poem by the American modernist writer and communist, although not Communist Party member because he was rejected. From his application was rejected. His name is Louis Zukofsky. He's very cool. And he has this line about like a queen in Bucks County. And I was like, well, you're telling me about my life, asshole. And then I stole it to be the title of my book. I'm going to start reading. Yeah, boots. Thank you, baby. Thank you. I'm going to stand here because the podium is kind of... Yeah, I'm just going to perch. I'm going to read the epigraphs. A queen in Bucks County pulls on her glove to show her gold ring. Tomorrow, the wedding will begin. Louis Zukofsky, A12. In these rooms of sleep and of dream, she continued in another of her letters, which will become famous after history has gone to sleep. We will walk around, brushing by each other, touching each other without actually touching. And that's from Kathy Acker's book, Pussy, King of the Pirates. Sip hole. Dear Kay, men buy me things. Uppers, cocktails, cab rides, or something more impressive. Who do I impress? A cheat, a villain, an amateur coquette. I'm riding in the shadow of a Wawa, a pair of withering cities, their gutted suburban corridor. It isn't nice and there's nothing coy about it, except me, your mercenary of the burbs, your sip hole, your nipple aficionado. Have I made you blush? I'm writing you perpetually in transit, shuffling somewhere on plein air, a lollipop on SEPTA. I know what I look like and what I'd like to. A pants-grewer phoenix? Enough to tease in good lighting, but just at present my audience is the bridge signing Trenton makes, the world takes into a sullen Jersey. Presenting here my reeking autobiography, nobody around to take a bite. Would you? Well, what do men by you? I want one of those extravagant types to pay my rent. I want another to show up regularly with a car full of groceries right at the end of the month when it really matters. I want a third to nurse my immaculate asshole with the kind of attention you lavish on a gift. Dear Kay, these letters will be famous after history has gone to sleep. Till then, I'll dazzle with my nipples on the inside of a shirt, fulfilling to the genre what Liza and the Pet Shop Boys did to Losing My Mind. Elaborate, sustain, convoke a synthed-up neurosis ballad. Not going left, not going right. Now home to push into a vacant 5 a.m. and ruin every bit. Turner. Oh, that's his name. I forgot to tell you. That is the name of the character. His name is Turner. Grace Zabriskie, Stephen. Sounds like jack off if you do it right. Athletic-y, white and striped. A rumor glyphed in cloth out of my hole. Shut up. Wrong life cannot be lived rightly. Then there's the pines. Dopamine, ketamine, John Cazal. Delict, persona, Howard Ashman. Doppelbanger, T-Service, Grace Zabriskie. Diaresis, Kohlrabi, Victor Shklovsky. D-Lovely, Tweaking, Donna Summer. In a park thick enough to hang a beard on, the hunk masseur pummels your boyfriend's ass like a doping cyclist on the tour. Hell uphill climb. And the rain has commenced its delicate lament over the orchards, talented, having a great time. Once I looked out my apartment window into the shaft to watch a V of pelvis and an H of abs. A then boyfriend jerked me off with commas. This bitch inside with puppies yelps when you prod her. The jock strap advances, a scratch and sniff of inspired method. A wail your boyfriend compares to the abrasive giggle, mine, a seam of buttock, or an interview on live TV. I always wanted to feel better. This very talented, upbeat, having a great time lady. Caller, you're on air. Turner. I need my water. It's just easier to stand, even though I'd like to not have a barrier between me and you, but that's okay. I do my best. I think this is fine, yeah. I do my best to cheat. Dear Connie, the leisure you need to have sex, well, the leisure you need to write. It's leisure and everyone should have it. When everybody does, it won't be leisure anymore, but something else. Like and also totally unlike a bed to sleep in. Which is what I think I mean when we say writing should be for everyone, but I don't speak for anybody. I'm not the first to ask this question, neither the most nor the least leisured. It's not a game and nobody racks up points, though I've got a bag of someone else's stars. Time passes, not metaphysically. I'm clocking in and out. I sleep on the ride home. I do my best to cheat. Skipping work is a tonic until you get busted for time theft by those who stole it from you first. I steal from train conglomerates, but who'd convict me? A conductor? One walks by with tattoos, surely a friend in the wrong uniform, but actually he busts me over the clip ticket. He doesn't buy the Bambi Act. You can't trust a guy for his ink, a fantasy, romantic as they go. I've never fucked in the bathrooms of Regional Rail. I've never come hands-free. No longer true. I'm in love with the future tense only and keep it on a high shelf or hanging from my rearview mirror. I swear it'll take down the highway too, and whatever's left will be for the rest of us. Connie, if it gets any colder, my nipples will get hard enough to slash through the front of my shirt. Men stare and run back to their wives. Maybe I'll write a novel and call it The Daddies, though that isn't strictly my type, whose appetites range too widely. For a while, I borrowed my everything from Jacqueline Suzanne's novel Valley of the Dolls, milking its sometime mass appeal and limited imagination for a millennium of camp. If you haven't watched the movie with Sharon Tate, it's amazing. It's amazing. So that is a recommendation. Go home and watch Valley of the Dolls. And leave right now. I'm useless. Milking its sometime mass appeal and limited imagination for a millennium of camp. In Suzanne's masterpiece of entertainment industry blues, Anne Wells skids into the city out of a New England blizzard, her features ripe to score a millionaire, and then she does. A wife's wife with barbiturates on tap, she doesn't want them much until they skid back out of her romantic grasp. Can I wrestle something more than deco interiors out of this document? Sexually conservative, it's obsessed with fags and dykes. The life and death of vaudeville, getting your man to propose and lick you clean. As talentless stunner Jennifer North, Sharon Tate in the movie lilts, all I know how to do is take off my clothes, and that feels about as right as pressure on the velveteen rope of a prostate. Jennifer's the hapless con with good cheekbones who lies about her schoolgirl past and can't get a man to see past her top shelf. She goes out in a pop of melodrama, so I can't help feeling identified. Who's the Neely among us? The plain dynamic self-saboteur with a good voice, based on Judy Garland, who auditioned for the role, ballsy. Who's Anne? One of us will spill from grace onto an investment trampoline. I'll call that girl money. I'll whisper her surly name over the phone. Back to Sharon and what she knows how to do. The dads take them off for me. I think in profile I'm pretty cute, though I don't know what they see when they look at me. Someone slight and accommodating. Men buy me things. In a parallel life, it's chasers, and in both, the casting director picks out an antagonist of wives, a wife herself. Do I mind it? I think I mind it. That's not quite right. I want to interrupt myself. Have you ever hosted a jock? He purrs like it's his first time, though there he's been on the apps and he has the nudes to prove it. He's had a beer and then another, and then he offers you a bump, and by the time the drip hits, singeing, crappy, and free, he's doing laps around you as if about to score the latest in a line of trophies. I picked up one like that from the neighborhood. Actually, it wasn't such a bad time. Knotted somewhere between a high and a come down, I looked out my window at the illuminated fronts of loan shops and fast food joints while he stretched my hole loose and swept past my dick like it wasn't there. Stuck on the soundstage for Little Shop of Horrors, a Lower East Side with a busted ceiling for a sky. Did I match him grunt for plaintive grunt? Sure, but he smelt like every good thing. He's a snowdrop in winter liable to tear, rip him up by the root and drop him in his own mulch. A blushing kid with a priapic corsage, he wants to be trundled into the vacuous thing that keeps him wet and warm. A low-hung slut, he wants to feel like the captain of his own highway and peaceably oversee the flood that swings him into a ditch. Actually, he offers to flip. The reader will suspect by now that I don't. Like I suspect this champ of track and field has sprinted over to exercise his pelvic floor around a couple fingers in some black latex. Athleisurely in luck, the virgin blushes, the flower crumples, the runner cramps, and the beveled road swamps away. At a nudge, every gruff top rolls over to expose his belly and lift his hole around a pumping pair of hands. I pumped him into a flower bed. I pumped him into a ditch, and now I'm telling you. Is it leisure if I mind it? Turns out I didn't, not just for the compliment. Your mouth feels like pussy, he said. I ripped it out of him. Cradled between a hand in his ass, a hand on his cock, and these prodigy lips, what else could he accuse? I feel like every good thing, I guess it does. My mother was a vacuum cleaner, I like to joke, or I'll put that one on my Yelp page. Confused, he guided me back to his cock. I cradled, pumped, and pushed, and then he spouted like a broken water main. Goodbye, high school. Goodbye, home run crush. Epistosluts on the scene. I used to stack the crud of this world in grids and lists. Now I put it in sentences and interrupt them with a knife. I don't know that one is better except as it molds its way around the workday. I smuggle it home in a breast. It pays its way all dozen miles. What's it like? Over there where they have highways? Somewhere en route. Turner. There are many poems in this book titled Shut Your Mouth. I am going to read one of them. Oh, fun. Yeah. Shut your mouth. A caveat. There'll be another body by the end of the poem. Turner likes big gestures, being talked about. He likes it when Mike, different Mike, scoops his ass up off the mattress and shakes it like a puppet. An electrocuted puppet. A piece of ass flapping in a puppet wind. Mike shoots with the surprise of a drain unplugging. Gargle, suck, pop. Did I come after him? Sure. On the bus later, Turner's phone buzzed and buzzed. There'll be another body at the end of the call, just one of those talks, and at the end you really know somebody. The stage lights fall, and everybody dies a bit. Shut your mouth, then rallies manfully. Let's read one of the tranny ones. Thank you. Yeah. One second. I was going back and forth with my publisher, not with Dante, with Dante's boss. He's a very sweet man who puts up with bullshit for me. And he was like, you're allowed one. You're allowed one moment when I break the fourth wall. So this is it. Travel advisory for Constance Augusta. 1, a device. Dear Connie, I expect at any moment the scaffolding on this facade will collapse to reveal either nothing or an attractive hood ringed with fur. Underneath the hood is Turner, a persona in a bag. I suppose this is like replying to the noirish gun at my temple that I am not Kay Gabriel, minor internet personality, but I am the stinker holding the gun. Should I say cocking? Oh, that's my shtick, like sticking a tongue depressor in my mouth in public and going, Turner can't come to the phone right now. Can I take a message? Here I vamp for our curious spectators. I'm vexed at the tendency of writers, living and dead, to use transsexuals as the window dressing of social decay, a metonym for public space seductively in crisis. Surely this is cousin to these same icons' habit of pursuing a literary drag, but not really a consequence of it unless you don't think transsexuals read. I wrote A Queen in Bucks County on a diagonal from transliterature because I don't appreciate being first outed and then hailed as pretty but dumb, or hopelessly abstract, which I expect will continue until I scare the haters off pornographically. Let's say these are one and the same coin, a literature of the city, dicking around in the afterimage of modernism, in which transsexuals always mean something else, a private literature of recognition. Let the motherfuckers further consider that their metaphor might come unsexily to life, and living need housing in that glamorous, impoverished city, and testify to something other than an origin story that could be blurbed as important. I was reading a novel, and I won't give you guys the name, but I was reading a novel that was republished recently, that came out in the early 90s and was republished recently, and it did exactly this thing, and I wasn't aware of it before. And it is indeed by a writer who is one of my absolute, probably top 15 favorites. And I was like, ooh. He is the doll, but ooh. But I was right. I really hate being right. I really hate it. I'm good at it. I want to ear fuck the device, and I want you listening over the phone. Last night, I dreamt of myself, Lana Turner, a milky sentence, lumps in my mouth. I tell Joe, Turner is a way to seduce my friends without having to deal with the consequences. I tell Stephen, Turner is a heteronym of the author. Shiv calls me boyish, girlish. Dear Connie, what should I call you? Come back tomorrow, I'll be more specific. Meanwhile, halfway through this poem, I moved from a shitty apartment in an affluent Jersey town where I was, and at the time of writing and rewriting this letter, am still, employed for a low wage, to a gentrification box in Flatbush. I thought that living with the tech girls of Brooklyn would solve my cash problems, but actually it means colliding daily with their halo of money, a queasy imposition against the tenuous statuses of wage, immigration, and healthcare of those I love most, including myself. Quote, I just need something. I need a third credit card, my roommate says. But I can't move. I derive too much sadistic pleasure from the quarrels of money with her live-in boyfriend. Then again, if I have written this poem prolifically, it is largely because of my currently lush, at the time, lush, relationship to the working day. For a brief time, I have needed to clock in nowhere, not even a classroom, a luxury I take with a vengeance when my employer only recently threatened paycheck, insurance, housing, and visa status over a flubbed translation. You understand that if I, Turner, a heteronym of the author, am luscious, viscous, and sly, if I schlep from fiberglass core to weedy suburb with minor need, or a hat full of pleasure and tell you all about it, if I lie, rob, and insinuate it's because I'm a cheat, a villain, and a leading lady, oh, here's Turner again. Would you like to speak with him? Dear Connie, Turner is a delicate temptress and he can hear you. He's spitting, he's out for blood, he won't put on his coat. He's strict in his dogmas, and in this he resembles a boyfriend. He's lax in his principles, and in this he resembles everybody. He instructs me to attach the following statement. 2. The statement. A Queen in Bucks County is a serial poem. It takes the form of an epistolary series composed by me, Turner, a heteronym of the author, a persona in a bag. I address myself to some recipients, the letter, several dedicatees, the lyric, and a severe burning grudge or two. I, Turner, will make you horny, mad, or enthused. I will make you squawk or come. You'll leave the lights on when you choke. 3. Travel advisory for Constance Augusta. Please don't sit or stand on baggage carousel. Connie, this sign is just as cruel as it is imperative, especially for the kind of carousel that doesn't disgorge its bags from a significant chasm but loops around in the shape of a boot, and the same bags reemerge from tantalizing black car washy plastic. It could be any bag emerging, but it wasn't mine. Yes, this must be a letter for Connie. I'm in transit. So is my bag, but it's not with me. It transited Lake Ontario in a different craft. So why not run off with someone else's bag? If really my concern is that I lost some massive clothes and makeup and underwear, maybe all my makeup and underwear, could I saunter into the night with a stranger's adequately sized wheelie bag? And I'd have a bag for sure, but there I'd be without underwear walking out into Queens, where it really matters. When my bag returns from its adventure, I might well kiss it or do a cartwheel. I'd cartwheel into the path of a bus, then I'd be screwed. Oh, the carousel is starting its warning farts. Now I could ride. Love always, Turner. I'm going to read 2 more. One very short. Yeah, because some of you guys were watching Gregoraki before, I'm gonna keep on with that theme. It's a good theme. I could go on. Dear Joe, good morning. I'm shallow, sleepless, irrepressible. Does that endear me to you? 5 a.m. in March, wind smacks the skylight and hustles refuse over Flatbush like somebody's idea of a zeitgeist. Hi, it says time to nap, but instead I'm writing testaments of what and who I love. Mike is sleeping in my bed, warm and furred like a cat with a beard and a tattoo sleeve. Maybe he would resent that description. I can do no other. I'm awake in another room, achieving nothing in the second person singular. Hello. I do it for God and the television with a promiscuous heart. I do it with prosthetics, but apropos of anybody with an opinion about them, you are forbidden, I want to say, from evaluating my component parts. I'm an atom. Fuck a metonymy. Fuck a catalog. First, I composed that sentence. Then I felt myself get eye-banged by every guy with a beard on the subway platform. Don't think, Joe, I didn't sometimes return the favor. Mike's gone now, who brought me Oreos and spooned while I dreamt my nipples turned into mice and died. It's spring, and I've been eyeing every aging wonder boy in the park, plus his leanly pumping quads. There's sprigs of magnificent hair. There's even crocuses. Furious purple, delicate violet, contemptuous yellow. Now I'm on a train. Hello. My imaginative lusts riddle bullet holes in the side of the achievable. Have you ever wanted to get fucked by an abdomen, an armpit, a couple of pedaling legs? My preferred position with Cam, for instance, letting him pile drive my face from above. I lie down in my bed like a failed porn actor. I can imagine the camera fixed on my dewy-lined eyes, the bottom half of my face obscured under a cock and a tremendous cupid's bow, my cheeks sharp enough to be an architectural instrument as both of us try to remember our lines. But from this point of view, it's more like sex with a wiry frame and faded punk tattoos. Halfway into Jersey anyways, and I'm thinking about your letter, poem, whatever, All I Want by Joni Mitchell, where every paragraph begins, I want. I is the letter's only person, want its only verb. It's Monday morning, what do I want? The flourishing of bees and grasses, never for anyone to pay rent, for the landlord to stop for fuck's sake spying on us. Also a backyard. It all, the whole world. To speak veritably about no appetite, never again authenticated, no more bad faith prurience, my done taxes, a living wage for CUNY adjuncts, no moving apartments, no falling to pieces, various men, if only they could finger, only some items impossible, some are consequential, I fill up the tank and say goodnight and go, I could go on. Patty Schemmel, the drummer from the band Hole. Thank you. Patty Schemmel writes in her memoir that she joined Hole after Doll Parts was already cut, but wrote a new drumline for the end and can still hear the more ambitious resonance of her snare in the final 16 bars or so, sounding a hollow trench for Courtney's appetite. I fake it so real. I regularly dream I'm in a band, but of course can play no instrument. Instead, I writhe on stage, exacerbating attention, my face flushing, well, really my ears, and my own desperate hot need to be seen. Dear Joe, you get me. So what if I want to be embarrassed? Usually, I feel like telling anybody your dreams feels like showing your ass to strangers. Well, so what if they look at what's good for them? Last night, dreamt of being flat, ran all night to the top of my own dimension. Night before, the dream about the mice. Then I came into possession of an immense stash. Pursued by dream police, I hid my ketamine in the pastel candy shop of other pharmaceuticals. Even in dreams, I can purloin a letter, but the cops in my head got wise to the trick, even to a daring cinematic escape down a garbage chute where a man with facial hair tries to recall my identity. By train through Jersey, no spring here yet, everything brown, enclosed, backyarded. And what have they done with my full stops? The Wawa in reach. I'm Duncan. I'm somebody's sugary kid. Call embarrassment less a discomforting bug and more an intransigent object of mega-fixation. A hot flash and indisputable, even if unconfirmed, certainty of occupying somebody's attention despite themselves. Whether in vexation, mockery, or aimless arousal. Though maybe now my sense of shame, a fruit rotted on the vine. Like, for instance, to trick myself back to sleep, watch videos of anybody else eating things I can't or won't, like soups and noodles, foods on a stick, McDonald's breakfasts, lunch meats, eggs fried into toast, oh hell, as in a letter from or a season in, a staycation in hell. Good hell morning, I haven't slept again, I think I'm amorous infrastructure. Joe, I think you're a lyricist of infatuation and I'm a geographer of arousal. What, if any, is the relevant difference? How will we be graded? I'm a slice of cake and cream. I'm Michelle Trachtenberg in Mysterious Skin, and you're my malfortunate Joseph Gordon-Levitt. We applaud each other's poor decisions. Late for work again, good night. You run on my phone bill. I lie for hours in the hot water. We toast with our remaining vices and make up about it. Mutual spectators in the tragedy of semi-notorious men. Does that endear me to you? We're on the run from one to another parking lot. One of us, a cavalier drifter with life by the balls, the other a neurotic but the better driver, with hair the color of eyeliner. Which am I? You're a caramelized peach, poached, juiced, even at a distance so inconvenient, it would take a day to reach you by bus on several tumescent roads. Can you hear me where you sleep? Dear Joe, I want to finger fuck my boyfriend in this bar, and I want you to know I'm thinking about it. Surprise! With love at a boil, Turner. And finally, shut your mouth. Turner, hands in a cookie jar. How old are you? His trick asks. Turner counts backwards. Shut your mouth. He drives, right into summer. Thank you so much.
The way we thought about doing this was just like maybe I ask a couple questions to Kay, and then we can just all have a conversation. I don't need to be upfront.
No, I mean, good if you want to. I can say to everyone here, I mean, you all are so blessed, I think, to know Jeremy in the role of a teacher and an administrator. But we know each other through organizing together, and it's cool to be in this different context.
And I was actually, I mentioned to Kay that was like, I thought, a good first question to ask because, again, I primarily know Kay through organizing, through political activism, and, I myself as having something of an artistic life. I mean, part of how I was thinking about this is I was just reading the novel The Golden Notebook, which has anyone here read before?
I actually haven't read it, but many of my friends are like, "Oh, this thing."
Extremely amazing novel, and a lot of it's about a character who has writer's block. She's a writer. She has writer's block, and someone finally in this like super fucked up relationship she has asks her like, "What is your writer's block about? Like, give me one sentence." And she's like, "Well, I think," I'm paraphrasing, but it's basically like, "I think there's." I'm thinking of the person over me, like the revolutionary behind me, who's saying, "Why are you wasting your time scribbling, comrade?" And so I'm just kind of curious. I think there's like oftentimes a tense relationship at times between being like very active politically, being an artist, like trying to find the meaning, and I love how you put it, cultural radicalism, its relationship to political radicalism. So I'm just curious how you put those together in your head. What was it about, like, if the last few years generated this book, the last few years have also been a hugely active time in your life politically.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, what the relationship between those.
Totally. No, it's such a good question, right? And, I mean, we can break this down in a bunch of different ways. In a way, I think it's possible to overthink it. And it's like, well, you just do it and you find time in the day for both because, and if that's possible, then that's blessed. But, I mean, I don't actually think that's... Remind me the author of The Golden Notebook.
Doris Lessing.
Doris, right, exactly. Okay, yes. So I have not read. I am reading 2 different novels by a different big C communist novelist, Sylvia Townsend Warner. Are you familiar? Okay, so lesbian UK CP member, went to Spain during the Civil War for the right side, obviously. Just in case you were, and then there's this one novel that I read by her that's, I promise it's going to be interesting and relevant. That is about this it starts focused on this aristocratic woman who's she's 28, so she's young but not that young. Her children have just died. It's 1848. It's January 1848, and she's like, my husband is in Paris with his mistress. I will go to him and ask him to give me another child. And then she's in Paris in February 1848, so she ends up in Paris for the 1848 revolutions, and then she falls in love with the husband's mistress. And they take up together, so she kind of joins the revolution out of love. And then it ends in, I don't know how familiar you all are with how 1848 went badly. Bad, failed revolution, very bad. And at the end of the June days, which was the period kind of right in the middle before Louis Bonaparte takes over, where a bunch of revolutionaries are murdered right after that happens, it ends with this woman reading the manifesto, because it's June 1848, so the Communist Manifesto was just published, and it's a really interesting way to actually think about that problem from someone who also was doing this as an active socialist, as somebody who went to Spain in a period of great political turmoil to try to make an intervention and to change the world in a real way, in a liberatory way. So let me answer that slightly differently from what I'm doing with my own work. A few years ago, everybody on the left really, or everybody who, let's say, who had a stake in changing things, really, excuse my language, shat the bed about this one. And they made it way harder than it had to be, right? And on the one hand, you had say sort of Obama-era liberals who were well, if we do sort of tokenism, but just more intensely, then we solve the problem. And and there was a kind of rejection of that from a scene of a scene that was really congregated around the Bay Area. That was well, actually, not only do we not want to do that, but actually culture makes nothing happen. Poetry makes nothing happen, which is a line by Auden by the poet W.H. Auden that they love to quote. These people, I'm not going to name here because they're not worth it. But if anybody wants, I'll give you their names off the mic. They love to talk about this thing by Auden that's poetry makes nothing happen. The idea is sort of well, we do this, but we're intellectuals, we're petty bourgeois intellectuals, and we're not the motor of history. The working class is the motor of history, so it's okay for us to kind of just waste our time, as they put it to themselves, clarifying things to ourselves in a kind of slightly masturbatory way, but it's okay because we're feeling full enough. Both of these options suck, in my opinion. Both of them just stink. They are bad ways of thinking about the problem, which is let's think about the problem of cultural production. Why is this interesting? Why is this interesting to us if we kind of agree, we look outside, we see the world is very, very, very bad. And we're we would like to change that, please. For all kinds of reasons, we would like to change that. Rather desperately and quickly, but also strategically and in a way that actually does something. And the formulation that I have, I guess, in response to all of this that I personally settled on is that cultural production is interesting and useful because it changes how people think about their conditions faster than those conditions can change. Right, and I'll say that one more time because I know I can talk a lot, right? So cultural production changes how people can think about their conditions faster than those conditions can change. And so there's an element, so that's one problem, right? That's one situation, right? You actually want to if you're writing something or you're you guys are all art students. If you're you are animating something, you're doing something and you want it to have an effect on how somebody thinks about themselves in the world. Some kind of effect, right? There is one of the problems that you're confronting is just a relationship of pace, right? You want other people to be smarter and better at what they do. You want them to have more clarity. You want them to gain great pleasure in doing what they do. Like all of these things are going to happen faster than the way we live can change, right? That's on the one hand. On the other, there is, I think, a different relationship between cultural and political radicalism, which is to say there is a speculative thesis that is really important to me. I'll say, knowing you as a friend, I think it's really important to us, which is that life should be worth living, right? For many people, the way that they live right now is they live lives that are unlivable, right? That's just true. Or that are threatened with being unlivable because of, like right-wing motherfuckers or, rising ocean levels or whatever it is, right? But life should be worth living. And so there is a kind of relationship towards living that it has to do with a kind of like an affirmative stance, like almost like an ethical disposition that is like a lust for life, that fills and infuses the things that we do. And from that perspective, like having like things that not just clarify the world in terms of truth or change it quite immediately, but also like let's say fill it with our presence, and through that process make it possible for us to like change ourselves, and through that change ourselves, and through that process change the world around us. Like that is to me so like powerful and worthwhile, and that's also a little bit where I'm like, well, I mean, obviously, like, there's a kind of, like, political orientation to my work, but I love a bunch of stuff where I'm just like, oh, like, you're just an amazing, you're just dolling out. Like, that's fun, right? You're just dolling out. You are just an amazing queen. Great, fab, great, love that. So I think that's like, having this very, like this structure of feeling that is like plenitude, this structure of feeling that is like a lust for life. I think that's so powerful and meaningful, and it puts a huge motor in me. And so I guess that's how I attempt to square the circle. Although I think that the problem that Lessing raises is a real problem. I mean, I don't think that she's being naive. And I guess that's my response.
I love that. And that actually brings me to my second question, which was about lust for life and sex. So I'm curious.
Yeah. Great.
So I'm curious about like you could say like the book, it seems to me, sort of operates on two registers. One is like a formal inventive, one is, or formal linguistic inventive, one is like sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned in one of the ones you just read, sorry, I forget the title, but there's that line about, I'm accused of being abstract, and I'll get it out of them.
Scare my haters off pornographically, yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, I think, there's obviously a reputation like formalism can have for being like arid, abstract, yada yada, but I'm also like, I'm very indebted when I think about poetry to like, I'm a huge like Wallace Stevens person. I don't know if you are. We haven't talked about it actually.
I like her. I will gay Wallace Stevens, the most heterosexual man ever to have lived, but I do like her.
Complacencies of the peignoir, yeah. And I like Helen Bendler's interpretation of Stevens a lot as this like super, super erotic poet who's like trying to articulate the erotic in a way that is like not cliche, and that involves like a lot of play and abstraction. Similarly, you could say like HD has like similarities to that.
Uh-huh.
And similarly, I think you could say something like Freud, the very idea that sex often appears to us in dreams, which is this like weird, crazy formal language.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyways,
yes.
These are all occurred to me as I was thinking about your book, and I'm just thinking about like what you think, how you thought about as you were writing it, like the role between sex and abstraction.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess like so. It is this book that is. Yeah. I mean, I am a formalist. And formalism is really like hot to me, right? I mean, I think it's quite obviously you guys heard it. It's like very intimate. It's very embodied. It is felt in the body. And I don't actually see, I guess I don't see I know what you mean, and I know that there's like a way of thinking about it that opposes these two things, where it's like, you know, either you're going to do like formal acrobatics, and you're going to be like Ron Silliman's poet. I'm sure that none of you have read, and that's totally fine. You might, in fact, your soul might be better for it. You're going to be Ron Silliman, and you're going to literally write a series called The Alphabet, where, you know, all 26 books of it are identified with a letter. He's a very interesting guy. But, you know, formal acrobatics, or you're going to do something that's like a lot more, let's say, formally static, but has various kinds of like compelling content, including compelling content about like human relationships, right? Like, which are the kind of stuff that, you know, I mean, there's a reason why that's like the content of like most music and movies, right? Like, people love this shit. Understandably, it is pleasant, it's entertaining, it makes your life clearer to you. Oh, did I go out? Hello. Oh, well, she died. She's gone. No, I think she's fully gone. That's fine. I can project. I have Steve training. I can do this. So, okay. How do I think about this in relationship to my work? One, I guess, observation, is like the sex writing in this book is, in a way, it's a feature of the formalism, and of the particular kinds of formal acrobatics that it's doing, including like the form of the letter, right? Because it's like direct address. It might be good to tilt the camera towards me now that I'm pontificating from here, but we don't have to. Oh, sorry, honey. Yeah, no, you moved. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just like, I'm noticing the angle. Appreciate it. Fab. So like the direct address, like basically the kind of like big formal question that this book asks is like, if I talk to write a letter to Jeremy, right, or if I write a letter to Katie, and, you know, but it is something that is frankly vulgar, like filthy, and being read out loud, or being sort of like overheard or done in public in this particular way, like what kind of speech is possible? And how is that different from like writing an essay or just like writing a fuck poem or something? Like, what is how does direct address make certain kinds of speech possible? Including an intimate speech that happens out loud, which is, I think, an interesting way to think about the lives of people who have an intimate stake in sexual liberation, which are like that, like the dynamic of that is so much about like public-private, right? Partly because, like, you know, our political enemies just truly like shit themselves about like the fact of transsexuals in public, for instance, right? Which is supposed to be like, that's pure pornography. Like, I could have read something that was not at all about sex, and simply have been trans in front of young people, and as far as the right wing is concerned, that is pornographic, right? That is sexualizing. It is G-word, right? And you know, that, like, that's already kind of interesting. So the questions about intimacy and using direct address to make a kind of intimacy possible, like, that's a big part of this. But also, like, to make a kind of expansive thought possible, because there is, like, the other big, let's say, like, polemical orientation of this book is rejecting the idea that if you do something with your body, or if you are known for doing something with your body, that is not also a kind of intellectual labor. So let me break that down. Our world is really, really divided between like forms of like intellectual and like manual labor, right? And that is a lever of creating misery in all kinds of ways for people, frankly, on both sides of that divide, right? And there's an idea that if you are known for or understood for your body, or if you're basically in all kinds of ways, if your manual labor is, if your bodily labor is the important thing about you that people know, then your relationship to like thought and ideas is really like squished. That's not the right squished. It's really stamped out. And that, I think, is something this book like really tries to reject, and really tries to reject in, let's say, in an embodied way by sort of like, let's say, being and thinking both at the same time. That's partly why I'm so interested in like really crass language. Not in the kind of like, I'm sorry, forgive me for getting like a little bit theory for a second, but not in a sort of like Bataillean, like, oh, it's, you know, it's like the lower half of the body thing or whatever. But just in a way of like, what would it be like if like language was slightly less repressive about this thing and it was possible to do both of these things at once? Like this kind of like walking and chewing gum thing that is actually like really like somehow in violation of some kind of like ideological constraint. So I guess that's kind of my answer to that question. Sex is formal. Oh, and the final thing that I'll say about this is that the formal constraints on sex writing are super interesting to me, including in like there's this zine Straight to Hell that I quote in the book that published for like 45 years, a really long time, and they had all these interesting, and it was a lot of like readers would write in and like write the scenes either that they experienced or that they fantasized about, unclear. And like that has formal constraints, like, you know, sort of officially licensed pornography has certain kinds of formal constraints. So all that is like super interesting to me and things that I was like playing with generically.
Cool. I mean, I think we should maybe open it. Yeah, let's give another hand. And let's have a little bit of a conversation, yeah? So, people should raise their hands, and, you know, one of us will call on you. Maybe Elise can start us off, and then...
Totally.
Process going into the creation of this county. Do you like sit down and go like, I'm going to make a book, or was a lot of the writing done on the fly? Like how did that?
Oh, it's such a good question. Right. So I didn't know that I was writing like a novel, but I did have some idea. I knew that I wanted to write something big, and that was, say, like a project. That would have, let's say, some scale in it and some like ambition, right? And I don't know if any of you all, I know I'm at SVA, so I don't know if any of you all are also poets. I'm sure that some of you are, and if you're not, that's totally great, and again, probably better for your soul. Since I clearly am very worried about that. In poetry, there's a lot of tension around writing a project, and you know, I think people can be, for all kinds of reasons, pushed into writing, how to put this, short discrete poems that have one experience and one insight, which is a totally fine form of writing. It is personally deeply disinteresting to me. I think it credits thought. I think it makes it really hard to do something of an interesting scale, right? And then if we think about like, you know, you think about like different media, like, okay, why are, like, bar for bar, most musicians better than most poets? Okay, interesting. Most albums better than most books. I think I'll like stick to, I mean, a little bit different in the era of Spotify when that's like the album form is sort of degraded, but basically true. Right? Most you know, so when you think about, you know, like, okay, fine, great, interesting. What is the way that, like, and I was thinking this, you know, sort of for myself when I started writing this book 6 years ago. Wow, crazy. When I started, and I was like, well, what is a way to do something interesting? Like, the answer is scale, right? Like, doing something, and I'm sure that this is going to come up for you guys in whatever your, like, art practices are, but like scale. Like, you don't want to just do sort of something that could be contained to, like, one sheet or even, like, a series of those things. Like, you want to do something that, like, has meaning, gains meaning over time. The poet who really makes this thought very clear and possible is this guy called Jack Spicer, who was a real character. Died in 1966 in California. He was 40. He drank himself to death, but in this very dramatic way where he kind of melted in an elevator. And then was found in basically, like, he had multiple organ failure all at once, and then was found in his friends had a surgery room, he was found in a hospital. He dies. His final words to his friend Robin Blazer were, he sits up in bed in his fever and he says, my vocabulary did this to me, your love will let you go on. And then he perished.
Oh my God.
Anyways, before he did that, I know, it's like it's amazing. Before he did that at a relatively young age, he came up with the idea of the serial poem, which is basically like he has this big break halfway through his career, although, you know, it could have gone on for many years if he had put it all down. But he was like, everything that I've written up until this point, which is like individual poems, these are my one-night stands, and I'm not interested anymore. He's like, I only want poems that I write sort of 15 of them, or I write 25 of them, or I write 60 of them. And they all echo and re-echo through each other such that the meaning of them becomes clear over time. And that is scale, right? I mean, you know, novels in a somewhat more obvious way just do it in a more like, almost in a more like boring formal way, or in a more like obvious or straightforward formal way, but like scale. And so that was basically my process. So to come back to your actual question, that was basically my process writing this book. I was like, I want to do something. I at that point had not written a book-length sequence. I was like, I want to do something that is like really substantial on its own. I have these kinds of formal constraints. I knew I wanted to do something with the epistolary. I knew that it was going to be like really fucked out. You know, like all of, like these were. I knew that it was going to have this kind of really ambivalent relationship towards like trans literature and like talk about like gay and trans identity and how those two things are like kind of like looped through each other. But I didn't really know what it was going to be. And then I just started writing, and then basically actually what happened was I was like, oh, there's like a character here. Like there's like the heteronym, which is like Turner. Like that developed through writing it, and then it became, I was like, will there be anybody else writing with him? No, like he's the voice. He has a bunch of different addressees. You go through the book, there are different like modes that are associated with each one. And that and then it kind of came from there. And then I went through, I guess, like actually several rounds of like thinking and editing, and my publisher Stephen at NYPA was actually a really good editor of the book as well, and helped some more of the, let's say, like the fiction element in it come forward. And then that's on paper. Yeah, thank you. Please.
I'm pretty sure you said in the reading that like there in that like fourth wall part of yourself is like, am I the heteronym of yourself that
Yes. Exactly.
I think of that phenomenon like as the modern day reader as projecting yourself into a character, like really just going at it like, oh yeah, I have too many similarities with this character.
Yeah.
They are me, I am him. Which, if anyone knows me, I have like 5.
Great.
And it's just like, I want to do something with them.
Yeah.
It's like such a good experience of just exchanging character, like the relationship between yourself and a character.
Yep.
Which, yeah, I want to know how like
Uh-huh.
you could write it in like more, like how do you
Yeah.
write it out physically?
Yeah, totally. So actually, what I'm writing now is almost more relevant, I think, to this question than the books that I've already written, because I'm writing an actual novel, like a really straightforward novel, like the thing that I've just been bashing about being boring, like written down. I'm doing that right now, and. I'm not a trained fiction writer, and so I'm feeling my way into it, although it's fun, and I think it'll be a grand success. I don't know, we'll see. But I'm basically thinking about like this problem where you're like, I would like to take patterns that I recognize that cohere inside a person, right, or inside several people, and I want to make them real to me in a way that's not just like narcissistic, but does actually like, but like narcissistic, but does like recognize a pattern, like do something interesting. And I think the thing, like I actually there's this novelist, Lucy Ives, who is phenomenal and really, really, really love her work. She has a great book that was published last year from Grey Wolf called Life is Everywhere, and I really recommend it. It's a big book. I read it in like 30 hours. And it's a big book and like a nerdy book, and I read it in like 30 hours. That's fun. And one thing that Lucy talks about, she's like, when you're writing a character, like, write out something that they do not understand about themselves. Like, they're like people, which is true, like people in general have like a constitutive lack of understanding about like, even people who know themselves very well. It's just like the blind spot where you cannot like perfectly see yourself, right? And like that could be like a central problem, right? Like that like makes this person act out in maybe poor ways, in ways that are interesting, right? Because that's maybe, if you're doing like, or at least I'm thinking about this for myself, so maybe this is interesting for you as well. Like, oh, this is a story I want to tell, like I want to talk about how somebody is like compelling and seriously maladaptive, and like fails to recognize very important parts of themselves. But otherwise, is kind of like there's some stuff that's transparent, like she has to be compelling, right? So I guess like that's what, and then you can do that exercise with a totally different character, and that person could even be somebody who you like relate, or that character could even be somebody who you like relate to, but again, you're just recognizing patterns. And then it's like a different thing that this person fails to recognize about themselves, right? Which is to say, like, that's just your symptom, to talk about Freud. Like, that's just your symptom. That's just like the thing that makes it possible for you to be in the world in the first place. So I guess that's one technique that I have found so far useful. It was a little bit different with Turner because this is such a weird book, frankly. And so it wasn't hard to either distinguish Turner from myself or to see myself in him. And although the one thing that I'll add to this is that was kind of interesting is that talking about like this is I don't know, whatever. I'm just gonna say it. Talking about like my sex life as myself, and talking about my sex life as a twink bottom. I had to change. I have to say very little. Like, very little. Very, very little. Some important details, very little. And that, I think, is an interesting thesis about, like, the way that desire works and the way that, like, two different demographics are kind of, like, and, like, identity positions are, like, woven through each other. So I guess that's an interesting thing. Let's do a stack. So we'll do in the back and then up front here. And no, excuse me, in the back. And then here in the back and then here. Other hands. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Stop.
So I am going to do this, first of all, because otherwise I would be lovingly bullied by my two friends here, because I have to speak. And with the fear of the camera looking straight at me, hello. But it's not really a question, it's kind of like hopefully jumping point for things. Going first to, I can't remember which one of the first two questions, when you talked about living a life worth living. And I come from Latin America, it's half a personality. But in Colombia currently, with the elections for Pietro and Francia Marquez, Francia Marquez as the vice president, one of her campaign points was the idea of Vivir Sabroso, which is living deliciously. And in my country, Argentina, we have feminism, which, as flawed and complicated as it can be, it does have a very, what I think at the time shouldn't have been, but was a revolutionary idea, which was the worker not just deserving an honest, good life, but also like a dignified and joyous life. The idea of going to state-sponsored hotels, having time off, being able to go to the same beaches everybody else goes to, and just kind of like bring that up as a possible idea, because I especially noticed this coming from Latin America, where we don't have like that kind of like shadow of McCarthy or something that the U.S. has, and we're much more like leftist ideas that like we think like as a whole. And coming here, I feel like a lot of times like leftist movements in the U.S. kind of look at life as like, oh, it's just a shithole, it's bad. You gotta make it good. Meanwhile, I feel like in Latin America, we're saying like even if there's complete darkness, there's like a little bit of joyous moments, which I think also kind of goes really hand in hand with like when we write about transness and as trans people, we write about religious spaces, also talking about or sex, not just as a form of like, you know, because usually it's like sex work and stuff like that, which like perfectly fine for most people, so it's like it's not the only thing we have going for us. And also sex as duty, sex as labor, you know, yada yada yada. And then the last thing, which is if you haven't read it yet, I just want to recommend this to everybody. Camila Sosa Villada's Bad Girls, or Queens of Sarmiento Park. That's how they translate it in English. If anybody speaks Spanish, Las Malas. I just finished reading it. It's so incredibly good. I'm going to look to this one. But yeah, just those are the points. Yeah.
Thank you. That's amazing. I wanna talk about all of that. Are you from Colombia?
Huh?
Are you from Colombia?
No, I'm from Argentina.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but everybody keeps thinking I'm from
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about that. Because there's a stack, and I know what's our time?
About 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's do let me take like all of them, and then I'll just go through them at once. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Even if this wasn't the intent of the book, I think it's a really interesting analog of how layered the trans experience is and how individual it is. And I've never tried to consume work that's presented in this style and format. So with that said, who did you write A Queen in Bucks County for, or who do you think should be?
Great question. That's lovely. Someone right here. Yes, and then yes.
I apologize for my rudeness, but why do you use the word transsexual?
Oh, it's a great question. I love that question. That's not a rude question. It's just curiosity. And I do have an answer.
So, question, that's very, yeah. So, I feel like, example, as a non-binary person, I feel like wherever I go, I'm like representing a whole community, and like everything I do is like, I as a one non-binary person, I'm like, to another person, like I'm the whole community of non-binary people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, with writing this book, like how have your different identities given you pressure, like I'm representing this whole community and writing this book and also being a writer and just existing? Like, what was that pressure like, I guess?
Totally. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I wanna go through this stack and then maybe we'll take another one. So to your really interesting points, yeah, I mean I think I'm reminded of that thing that Lula said on the campaign trail last year that got a lot of play about like we're not just fighting for like workers to have like, you know, to be able to eat, but it's like to be able to like have like beer and like what's like the dish, like the kanya, and then it just, and he just kind of goes on for a while about like how good that thing is, and you're just like having a beer and chilling, and you know, I mean, like there's something about I agree with your assessment that in North America, frequently, because of McCarthyism and all kinds of other things, the way that we talk about politics, especially people who are like bread and butter economic issues, Jacobin the right-wing Jacobin magazine, can be really stunted, right? And in particular, the thing that we seem to miss is a really important principle of organizing that comes up in labor organizing, which is organizing for dignity. And it is like so much better and easier and more thorough to get people on board with the program if you're not just like giving, if they feel like they have an okay deal, even if you're like objectively you do not, but like they feel like they feel like they have an okay deal. But once you start talking about how they feel like kicked around, and they feel like they should just have a life worth like a livable life, like they deserve that. Like that is a way to tap into people's like emotions and ideas about like how things should be and how they should be with others, right? And that feels so important. So I mean, it's something that, you know, in DSA we put into our campaigns, and I think it's just like really fucking crucial. And it's like a beautiful vision. I think that was literally a word that the Sarahana Shrestha campaign, which was a campaign for Assembly Upstate last year, that won handsomely over an incumbent. One of the things that, and it was like fought on the basis of things like utility debt and the Green New Deal, including legislation that we have passed. Like the first Green New Deal legislation in the US, really cool. Well, her campaign slogan was "Life must be beautiful." And that's cool as fuck, right? And it clearly like captured imaginations, and that's just awesome. So that I think it's great. Who for? That's such a good question. So, you know, I mean, that is in a way, it's like, well, you know, I wrote. Excuse my, you know, I mean, I wrote a, like, again, weird book for weird people, but not just. I mean, I think that, look, one thing that's interesting to me, because I am really interested, obviously, in experimental literature and in formal experimentation, and in doing stuff that's going to surprise people, and being very left field and all these other things. One thing that I'm also really interested in is writing that gives people an intense pleasure relationship. Like an intense pleasure relationship that you come away from it and you're like, wow, that was amazing. I mean, I know not everybody. I don't believe that everybody's gonna have that relationship to my book. But I believe that would be arrogant. But you know, like I do, like, you know, when you read something or see something, you listen to something, or you're like, wow, I'm gooning for that. Like, wow, I love that so much. Oh my god. You know, like, wow, I'm fixated. That is something that I'm interested in. And there is something within people, among people who are like, oh, like who think of themselves as like writing sophisticated stuff or writing interesting stuff, or writing hard stuff. They like the word hard is kind of comes up, or like difficult comes up a lot, and they might not be as interested in again like an intense pleasure relationship, but I am, and I don't think that makes me special, although it is particular. And I guess from that perspective, for me, like, I want to think that is a way for people to get into the book who are not currently trans, although they might be, who are not currently queer, although they might become those things. Certainly who are not like currently poets. There is, to my mind, an extremely bad like way of thinking about writing poetry that has been relatively dominant for a while, where people like write books of poetry believing that only poets will read them, which is actually not true. It was kind of true a decade ago. It's not true anymore. And you know, it's like just believing like you can write something that like will interest somebody, take them from where they are to a different place. And I think that's, let's say, the rather complex dynamic that I had in mind when I was writing this book.
It's almost a book for egg citizens.
Well, I am not intending to trans the children, but if I do, then I don't see that as a bad consequence. That's I'll put it that way. Yes. I don't think if somebody reads something I write and later on is like, that sounds fun, great, awesome, glad I could help. To your question, so transsexual is. Okay, let me do the trans studies answer, since that was what I was teaching until I gave up my adjunct job because I have a full-time job now. Wow, amazing, love that. Truly, I love a living wage. For everyone. And I love it for me too. Okay, so, transsexual, as we might know, is a very old word for a certain way, let's say not every way, but a certain way of being trans, for a thing called, let's say, for like the way of being trans that includes a sex change. That is also a maybe slightly outdated phrase. I do hold on to it for a good reason. Transsexual, obviously, it doesn't have like a great provenance, right? It was like a German guy came up with it in the 1890s. Like, oh my god, it was gonna suck, right? And in the early 1990s, a series of people, including Leslie Feinberg and Kate Bornstein, came up with and began to popularize the word transgender, which later really just became trans, right? In order to make different ways of being, make different ways of being more possible, right? This elicited a response. The thing that movement is kind of portrayed as just like that's like progress. Okay, it actually elicited a response from people including Vivian Namaste and Trish Salah, that are people who said, well, actually there is something that's very important to hold on to, in a sense of, like some people are changing their, let's say, their embodiment in a way that makes their trans status a feature of their lives that is close to impossible to disguise, right? And we want to hold on to that sense, right? And so it's actually important for us to say not just like transgender or trans, but like transsexual, in order to sort of say like we are talking about a slightly different experience. This disagreement in the 90s produced the TS versus TG wars, a not especially useful fight. Never mind the fight among people who like the word transsexual about how many S's to spell it with, which I promise you that was a debate as well. And if you see, there are these shirts from an activist organization by this woman, Ricky Ann Wilkins, that say the Transsexual Menace. It was an organization that was active in the 90s, and there were people who protested the Michigan Women's Festival over the fact that they wouldn't allow trans women and all these other things. On those shirts, it says transsexual with just one S. So that was Ricky Ann Wilkins' opinion about how many S's. It was transsexual. There are, I think, a number. I'm not the only trans woman in 2023 who really likes the word transsexual, and it's not because of any fantasies about being like an old style transsexual or whatever that version of that thing that like contrapoints that woman says. Not about that. It is about wanting to hold on to a sense of how, there are particular stakes for saying, like, actually one of the things that I need to change about myself is I need to change my body for myself, for my happiness, because that is how I need other people to understand me. And that is also, of course, as we're, I think, probably, like, punishingly aware of, one of the most popular and successful forms of right-wing anti-trans legislation is preventing young people from accessing puberty blockers and sex change hormones, right? And so holding on to the fact that there is an actual sex change that people want, it's important to defend that, and it's important to say that that is real, and that is that is something that belongs to us and we deserve and should be made possible. Those are some of the thoughts that I have when I use the word transsexual. You are not wrong to highlight it as like, oh, that's a weird thing she did. But I'm not the only person who does, and I do think there's a reason to do it. And finally, to the question about, let's say, presumption and people, like encountering my thing and, oh, it's just, I mean, frankly,
Can I
yes.
make an addition? A small addition?
Yes, quickly, because we're close to out of time, and I appreciate Katie trying to close up.
Oh no, we're just going to the library, you guys stay.
Okay, fine. Well, that's fine.
Your food is here, okay?
Yeah, I saw. Thank you so much. Here. Yeah.
Well, how did the pressure of knowing that some people are gonna think of you as representing a whole community affect your writing at all? Did it affect your writing? Did it bias your writing?
Totally. So, okay, there are actually some trans in this moment when everybody, and it's a good thing, is writing trans novel, trans book of poems, you're a trans DJ, you're like a trans drag artist, so great, fab, you're a trans visual artist, great, fab, amazing. There are so many people doing it in every medium. Nonetheless, somehow, some people, and I won't name names, but I could, act as if they're the only trans in the village. And that is just remarkable to me. That is so crazy. Because you really you have to, I think it's worth the story. There was this sitcom in the UK in the early aughts that was called Little Britain. And there is a character who's I'm the only gay in the village, and he's under this fantasy, but everybody else is we're not. And it's just fascinating. So there are people who write as if they are the only trans in the village, and it's just what is up? Miss Mary, it's a fascinating deception. However, of course, there are more likely to be readers who encounter something and will think, aha, I'm reading the only trans in the village. Right. I think the best way around that is to, knowing that is going to be somebody's response, you actually have control as an author, and it's good to lean into it about how your work is read and misread, right? Not exclusively, but you have some control. And so it's, I think it would be very hard to come away from my book thinking, we found the trans woman. You know what I mean? It's a book that is written, it emerges from a social world and it is written to a social world. And if you are overhearing it, this is to your question about who it's for, if you're overhearing it and you're not of it, then your curiosity will be piqued enough that you will understand that. And something that, Sarah Schulman, who is a writer who I deeply admire and who I've learned a lot from, something that she likes to say is that in the 90s, as, let's say, gay and lesbian literature and gay and lesbian life was becoming less stigmatized and marginally more mainstream, that the stories that straight people told themselves about queer people were ones that isolated people from their social lives. And so you have, her example that she comes back to, it's useful on the film Philadelphia, starring Tom Hanks, in which he is the only gay and he's saved by a straight man.
He's the only gay in the village.
He's the only gay in the village, right? And then you look at how people actually live, and it's well, that's crazy, right? And you look at how people write about themselves, and you're nobody is writing that. Nobody is writing the story where they're the only, very few people are, right? And one of I guess where I'll close, one, I think, very important novel I'll give two examples, and then we'll close, right? One is of people who are doing the opposite of that. There's a lot of basically any good trans art makes it very clear that it is emerging from a social context of a bunch of people doing this at the same time, and that is why it's excellent. The source of its excellence is everybody doing it at once, right? And together, and in a way that is conversational and chatty and social and mutually buoyant, right? One good example of this is Imogen Binney's novel Nevada, which is often credited as the novel that started the modern wave of translit and came out initially in 2013, was republished by FSG last year, and is very much there is a main character, Maria, who has a little bit of main character syndrome, but everybody in her life is a trans, right? Or like everybody in her life is a trans woman or a trans guy or the dyke who's dating her or whatever it is, right? This is dyke who's dating her. So like that is so different from this entirely different like misrepresentation, right? Another good example is another Argentinian, Cecilia Gentile's novel, Faltas, or I guess it's kind of a novel. Yeah, it's a novel. Yeah, sure. That was published last year and is fabulous, really fabulous. And I'm not just defending her because she's my mom, or defending, I'm not just talking her up because she's my mom, although she is my mom. She's, like, Cecilia's amazing, and her novel Faltas is amazing, and even though it's about her, like, childhood in, like, a tiny town in a tiny town in Argentina, it's very clear that when she's talking about herself, she's like, oh, it was like me, like one of the faggots, and that boy was a faggot, that boy was a faggot, and then you get like little licks of her life when she moves to Rosario, and then she moves into like a kind of like a more expansive, so, she transitions, and you get that, and like that's also just a way of like really filling in like how everything we do with other people, and that is why it's amazing. And that is something that I was also thinking about when I wrote this book.
Awesome.
And I think we're out of time, so thank you guys so much.